We are here for goodness sake. Hello family, this is Carol Worth with Paul LLC, and welcome to the Goodness Forum podcast and YouTube, where goodness is openly discussed and amplified. Our topic today is the power of we. Not the game, like W-E, like we. And our guest is a dear friend of mine, Bob Scarfo, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself. Go ahead.
Great, thanks Carol. I'm a landscape architect and I've taught in universities in Canada and the United States for 40 years. And one of my goals all along has been to bring people together, and so that my students learn how to be professionals before they get out of school, and they're tested all along the way by the folks in the neighborhoods that they help them with.
Oh, wow. A test in the neighborhood. I was a teacher. I never tested anybody in a neighborhood. That's kind of cool.
Well, students, you know, they know the game. They know the learning game. But you put them in a neighborhood and it's the rules change.
Right. So it's actually like field work, like a practical.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely.
Oh, see what I mean? The connection, the power of we.
Yeah.
It's so great.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read, so we always have a quote.
Okay.
And so I'm going to read the quote and then we're just going to talk a little bit. So the quote is from Mother Teresa, who is now Saint Teresa. And here it is. I can do things you cannot. You can do things I cannot. Together we can do great things. So we chose this quote because to me that's what you do. What I know about your work, and I'm going to ask you to talk about, is that you actually have and continue to connect people in the community, businesses and neighborhoods, with your students who are learning how to do the kinds of things that you teach them to do in your programs. So I would love for you to talk about that, because yeah, you have all these different people who can do specific things, and then you guys come together and collaborate and marvelous things happen. So I would love for you to share with our audience kind of a little bit more about your background, but then talk about some of the projects that you've been involved with that you facilitated through your classroom.
Well, before I forget it, what I want to say is when I first heard you with the quote from Mother Teresa, where my mind went was not necessarily that I could do things, but I know things that you don't know. And you know things that I don't know, and together we can do great things. And you know, I think probably a balance between the two of them, absolutely. But yeah, a little bit about my background. It was, and I think it was an influence in it. I grew up in a blue-collar Italian neighborhood, and you never paid anybody to do anything. You know, you always did it yourself, or you had somebody down the street. And that's really where it kind of started, was this doing things together, you know, asking for help, getting help. You know, heck, what, almost 70 years ago, an early form of paying it forward.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. You know,
are you that old?
I am that old. Thank you.
He doesn't look that old, does he?
So now I'm blushing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so, you know, the 40 years, it's the majority of the projects we worked on in different universities were real, with real people, real clients, and like I say, the kids were tested constantly to be able to turn professional language into street language, into neighborhood language, and on the other hand, they were learning how to draw information and activities and skills out of the neighborhood people. And so there really was this blending and coming together. I think, you know, just a year ago I finished a project with a neighborhood here in Spokane, and we did a series of 6 workshops and then 2 workshops with kids. And all along the way, the neighborhood folks were part of the process. They were contributing, they were talking, they were discussing, and in the final presentation to the city, it wasn't my design, it was the neighborhood's design.
What were you designing?
New master plan for a 100-year-old park.
Oh.
And the neighborhood, like I say, took an active role in it. They gave ideas, they voted on parts of it. There were a few discussions of things that they wanted or didn't want, but the majority just flowed along. And at the end, literally, it was their park, not the professional hired to come in and do it for them. So.
And what like talk a little bit about the students that when they come into your classroom, what do you see that the growth that they experience in stepping out and being connected to the community in that way?
Well, I think your question really brings a lot of things to light, not just university students, and I'll come back to that. But the transition over a semester, or with luck if I have them for several years, is definitely, it's an obvious growth in confidence. It's a growth in confidence that's displayed by their being able to ask a stranger questions and being able to discuss the answers. And I think as designers, as landscape architects, and then some of my students were architects and interior designers, the real power we have is that we can do drawings. And now suddenly people start to see their words turned into images, and they can more quickly say, yeah, that's what or no, that's not what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And so it really is a maturity. And then since I retired 3 years ago.
Where did you retire from?
The last 19 years I was here with Washington State University. Before that, University of Maryland. Before that, University of Guelph outside Toronto in Canada. Rutgers, University of Kentucky.
Wow.
And I went willingly from place to place.
You get around, man.
But but what your question really brought to mind was I have this very strong belief in youth, and that kids have just been, I think there are two highly ignored and underutilized resources in all communities, and it's the elderly and it's the kids.
Yes.
And it's really, when you start to think about it, the schools, until recently, there are a few changes that are coming through that are nice and really good, but for the most part, schools are on the periphery of a community. Kids are sequestered away in a school for God knows how many hours a day, how many hours a week, how many years, and then all of a sudden they get a certificate and it's, oh, you're ready to go into society. And they don't know what to do.
Right.
And so my university students got that transition. I've been trying to bring that down into high schools and middle schools because, the real, I think the beauty that we could have is that we could have schools without walls. They could be, the community could be the classroom.
Right.
And kids are so much more creative than we give them credit for. And if we give them problems to solve, and that's not to say they're out on their own completely, but there are professionals. There's now what's called a maker space, and it's a space where, and the maker movement, and it's where kids are given the tools to exercise their creativity. And I honestly think that a community could turn to its kids, and I think there should be at least one, if not two or three schools, a middle school and maybe two high schools in a community where they are think tanks, and the community brings problems to the kids, and the kids work with professionals and with the community, and begin to transition, begin to learn how to be an adult by being with adults, and maybe the adults get to remember what it's like to be a kid.
Learn how to be adults themselves.
Yeah, that too. And contribute products that are beneficial to the community. I've always believed that kids should be learning while they're giving to their community.
Yeah, that's so great. So could you kind of describe to the audience a little bit, as you're talking about this, it's so intriguing to me, but I'm sure, I don't really have a full grasp of what, like the kind of projects you do, landscape architecture, it's sort of like, maybe I get it, but you know what I mean? Like, could you describe to them what it is that you do when you're doing a project with you know, that park that you were just talking about? Like, what does it mean to do landscape architecture?
I think it's a good question.
Wow.
It really goes, and I'm not tooting my own horn here, I went back at 37 and got a PhD in social geography, and people go, social geography, what is that? And it's a different form of landscape architecture. It's understanding how people interact with their surroundings and begin to give it character and meaning and form. And that's really, I think a professional landscape architect is as much a psychologist as they are a designer. Because if they don't know their client, and I design something for you, and I don't understand who you are, when I leave, you're going to change it.
Yeah.
If I can really do my job well, you're not only going to cherish it, you're going to take care of it, you're going to maintain it, or the buzzword of the day is you're going to sustain it. Yes. And so sustainability, in my mind, is not technology, it's not physical hardware, it's people. And if the people are part of the process, if the people are actively involved in whether they're kids or adults, actively involved in the generation of an environment, then it will sustain itself, because the people will, it's their sense of identity.